If you had told me a year ago that I'd one day be standing in my brother's living room watching his kid destroy a brand new console because it wasn't the right version, I would have laughed, or sighed, or maybe both. My name is Caleb, I'm 34, and unfortunately, this isn't even the most unhinged thing my family has ever pulled. But it was the moment that pushed me from patient older brother to someone who finally realized that being the responsible one wasn't a badge of honor. It was a target on my back. I guess the best way to start this is by explaining that my brother, Liam, and I were raised in the same house, but somehow grew into two entirely different species. I got the be reliable gene, punctual, organized, the one who remembers birthdays and brings extra snacks to family events. He got the rules don't apply to me gene. Our parents weren't strict, but they expected basic manners. Liam treated every boundary as a starting point for negotiation. By the time we were adults, I worked my way into a decent career, finance, small business investing, nothing glamorous but stable. Meanwhile, Liam bounced between jobs like they were stepping stones across a fast-moving river. He'd leap onto one, wobble, panic, and then leap to the next. Then he married Mia, a woman who seemed very normal the first few months we knew her. Warm smile, polite, a little reserved. But the second they moved in together, overnight, she became someone who looked at everyone else like we were employees in a shop she didn't remember hiring. They had their son, Jasper, a year after the wedding. Most kids are cute by default, even when they're being little troublemakers. Jasper was cute too, just heavily coached. He never heard the word no, not once. Everything was, we don't say that to Jasper, or we don't upset Jasper, or, my personal favorite, Jasper shouldn't have to deal with disappointment because childhood is short. Meanwhile, I'm watching this kid grow into a little emperor who thought gravity existed purely to hold his feet on the floor while everyone else ran around, keeping his world perfectly comfortable. Before anyone says it, yes, I tried talking to Liam. More than once. I'd say things like, hey, do you think maybe we should tell him no about something occasionally? And Liam would instantly get defensive, like I'd insulted his entire lineage. We're doing gentle parenting. He'd snap, even though nothing about their approach resembled gentleness. It was more like they were emotionally bubble-wrapping their son until he couldn't function without praise, special treatment, or some kind of reward. And look, I'm not a parent. I don't pretend to know everything. But I know children are human beings, not collectible porcelain figurines. So, over time, I learned to stay out of it. I'd show up to holidays, keep conversations polite, and ignore the moments where Jasper snapped at servers or threw himself onto the floor because someone else got a bigger slice of cake. Still, I cared about my brother. Enough to help him when he genuinely needed it. He always made it sound like temporary help. A short-term loan here, a small investment in his business there, a few mortgage payments when things got tight. And I didn't mind at first. He was my brother. Blood and all that. But it slowly became obvious that Liam didn't see my help as help. He saw it as a renewable resource. Something that reset every month. The way someone might see unlimited data on a phone plan. The moment I realized this was becoming a pattern was last spring. He called me, said their electricity was going to be shut off. I paid it. 2 months later, same call. He didn't even sound embarrassed. Just annoyed he had to explain it. Meanwhile, Mia never acknowledged any of it. She'd breeze past me at family dinners holding a latte she somehow always had money for and say things like, oh, hey, with the same tone you might use for your mailman. So what does all of this have to do with the PS5 incident? Well, everything. It was the boiling point. The culmination of years of giving, forgiving, and overlooking small slights that didn't feel small anymore when they stacked up like Lego bricks under bare feet. This whole disaster started a week before Jasper's 13th birthday. Mia sent a group text to the family, me, our parents, and Liam's in-laws, saying they were organizing a meaningful, heartfelt birthday for Jasper. The message seemed sweet enough until she added, we would prefer everyone contribute something valuable rather than something random. Please coordinate to avoid duplicates. Valuable. Contributions. It sounded less like a birthday and more like a fundraiser for a very entitled cause. Then Liam called me separately. Hey, bro, he said, sounding far too casual. So Jasper really wants the PS5 Pro. You know how he's been talking about it nonstop. He hadn't been talking about it nonstop. He'd mentioned it once at Easter, for about 45 seconds, before switching topics to complain that his lemonade had pulp. I asked Liam, "Isn't the PS5 Pro, like, insanely overpriced right now?" He hesitated, then said, "Well, but you know how important this is to him." Important? Like his life depended on it? He continued, "I figured maybe you could handle that gift? You know, since you're good with money and all." Good with money. That phrase always means we don't want to pay for it. I reminded him gently that I'd already helped with the mortgage twice in the past few months. He brushed it off like I was listing minor inconveniences. "This is different," he said. "It's a milestone birthday." I told him I'd see what I could do, which was my polite way of saying no. But after thinking about it a few days, and after talking to my parents, who weren't buying anything big either, I decided to get Jasper a regular PS5. Not the Pro model that cost as much as a minor surgical procedure. The standard was still expensive, but manageable. I figured he'd be thrilled. Or at least grateful. That was my mistake. Expecting gratitude from a kid who'd been raised on velvet cushions and zero consequences. The birthday party was at their house, a two-story suburban place that looked nice on the outside, but was constantly on the brink of foreclosure. Mia decorated the living room with silver balloons spelling Jasper 13. The kitchen island was covered with catered snacks, and Jasper sat on the couch wearing a designer hoodie and looking bored, like royalty awaiting tributes. I walked in carrying the big, neatly wrapped box. Liam smiled like he'd just won a raffle. "Oh, perfect timing," he said, patting my back. "Jasper's been waiting for this one." I ignored the weird phrasing, "this one," like the gift was already predetermined, and handed the box to Jasper. He ripped the wrapping paper dramatically, like he was performing for an invisible camera crew. The second the PS5 logo showed, the room murmured in approval. Then Jasper's face froze. Not in shock, not in joy, in offense. "This is the regular one," he said flatly. I thought he was joking. Truly. So I smiled and said, "Yeah, man. It's the new model. Should be plenty of fun." He stared at me like I'd just handed him a brick. I said I wanted the Pro. "Why would you get this? This is basically old." His voice got louder, sharper. Liam didn't correct him. Mia didn't say a word. She literally sipped her coffee. The room fell silent. Jasper's jaw tightened. And then, before I could react, he lifted the console box and slammed it onto the floor. Hard. The packaging burst open. The console cracked against the tile. Someone gasped. I think it was me. Jasper pointed at the shattered PS5 like it was my fault the floor existed. "Now I can't even return it. Why would you ruin my birthday like this?" I honestly didn't process the next few seconds in real time. Because the sound of the console hitting the floor wasn't what hurt the most. It was the way everyone else just sat there. Mia sipping her coffee calmly. Liam rubbing his temples like I'd made the situation inconvenient for him. Jasper glaring at me like I had committed some personal betrayal. I barely said anything. I was too stunned. I just crouched down, looked at the broken console, and exhaled. A long, slow breath that wasn't sadness or anger, just a feeling like something heavy had finally clicked into place. That's when Liam stepped closer and said, in this low voice he probably thought sounded tough, "You have 5 minutes to apologize to my son." I looked up at him slowly. "Apologize for what?" "For upsetting him," he said. "You know how important this gift was. You knew he wanted the Pro. And now look what happened." He gestured toward the mess, as if I had thrown it. Jasper crossed his arms. "Yeah, say sorry." That was the moment the emotional math of the past decade suddenly lined up. Every loan, every favor, every time I'd stepped in to fix another one of Liam's messes. He didn't see me as his brother. He saw me as a resource. And resources weren't allowed to disappoint him. I stood up slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell him he was out of his mind. I didn't fight. I didn't explain. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was their normal. And it wasn't going to be mine anymore. I pulled out my phone. Calmly, quietly, almost peacefully. And I said, "Okay, no problem." Liam nodded sharply, satisfied. Jasper smirked like he'd won something. But they had no idea what I meant. Because the first thing I did was open the banking app one used to automatically send their mortgage payment every month. And I canceled it. Then I opened the investment portal where I held the 30% stake in Liam's business that he'd begged me to fund years ago. The shares I had paperwork for. The shares that, by contract, I could reclaim if any agreement terms were violated, including disrespect, harassment, or verbal hostility toward me. terms Liam had agreed to without reading because he always assumed I'd never enforce them. I clicked Reclaim Shares. Ownership transferred instantly. I looked at Liam and said, still calm, "Good luck paying rent next month." That was when his face finally changed. When Liam's face froze, it wasn't just shock. It was something deeper. Something I hadn't seen since we were kids, and I caught him sneaking out through the basement window, only to find out later he blamed it on me and got me grounded. That same pinched, cornered look, like reality wasn't behaving the way he expected it to, like the script in his head had suddenly been rewritten by someone else. He took a step toward me, eyes wide, voice low. "What do you mean, good luck paying rent?" I didn't answer. At least, not right away. I was watching his expression shift through disbelief, confusion, anger, and finally, fear. The kind of fear you only get when someone who has always cleaned up after you suddenly stops. When the safety net quietly pulls itself away, and you realize you've been miles above the ground this whole time and never once looked down. Mia stood behind him, still holding her coffee. Her expression barely flickered. The only sign she'd heard me at all was the subtle tightening in her jaw. She wasn't as surprised as Liam. But she wasn't calm, either. She was calculating. I could see it behind her eyes. Jasper didn't understand any of it yet. His world still operated on the principle that adults fix things, adults replace things, adults apologize when you scream loud enough. So he just crossed his arms and scowled, waiting for someone to refocus the attention on him. But Liam stepped closer. "Caleb," he said, trying to regain the authoritative tone he used when he wanted to sound in control. "This isn't funny." "I'm not joking," I replied. He swallowed hard. You can't just. What does that even mean?" "It means," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that I'm done." That one sentence seemed to take the oxygen out of the room. Even the other guests, Mia's parents, my own parents, cousins, were watching with stiff, confused expressions. They all knew I was involved in Liam's finances to some extent, but no one knew how deep it went. I'd always kept that part quiet to avoid embarrassing him. But now, there was no point in hiding anything anymore. Before anyone could speak again, Jasper stomped his foot. "Dad, make him apologize. He ruined my birthday." I glanced at the shattered PS5 pieces on the floor. "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "You did," Jasper snapped. "You said you were getting me a PS5 Pro. You promised." I had said absolutely nothing of the sort, but I wasn't surprised he believed it. Jasper had been raised on rewrites of reality that suited him better. If he wanted something, then surely someone had said he could have it. And if they didn't, well, someone should have. Liam exhaled, trying to juggle the exploding situation. "Caleb, let's step outside and talk." "No," I said. "There's nothing to talk about." He blinked. "You're being unreasonable." That word hit me like ice water. Unreasonable. The exact word he'd used every time I tried to set a boundary. Every time I'd said no. Every time I told him he couldn't just rely on me like some sort of permanent financial flotation device. Unreasonable. It was almost funny. Meanwhile, the room fell helplessly quiet. No one wanted to intervene, not even our parents. My mom looked worried, my dad looked tired, and Mia's parents looked deeply uncomfortable. But none of them said a word. Liam tried again. "Okay, just calm down." "I am calm," I said. "I know you think you're teaching us something," he continued, voice shaking. "But this isn't the time. This is Jasper's birthday." "And?" I asked. "And you're making a scene." I looked down at the shattered console, the expensive gift I bought out of goodwill, not obligation. Then at Jasper's crossed arms, his tantrum-ready stance. Then at Mia's blank, unbothered expression. Then at Liam, who was somehow managing to be both angry and terrified at the same time. "No, Liam," I replied. "I'm not making a scene. I'm just done being part of one." That's when the whispers around the room started, distant, uneasy murmurs. People shifting uncomfortably, trying to convince themselves they weren't witnessing the unraveling of something that had been breaking for years. Liam reached toward my phone. "Show me what you did." I stepped back. "Don't touch me." He reeled slightly at the tone. He wasn't used to it. He wasn't used to me saying no and meaning it. Mia finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but edged like a blade. "Caleb," she said, "this feels incredibly disrespectful. Whatever frustrations you have with Liam should be handled privately, not thrown into our son's birthday." Our son. Not Jasper. Not the kids. Their son. Their world. Their bubble. The universe where everything revolved around what he wanted. I met her eyes. Your son smashed a very expensive gift on the floor because it wasn't the version he wanted. And you let him. We weren't going to shame him over a disappointment, Mia replied. That's not how we parent. Oh, I know, I said. I'm very aware of how you parent. Her jaw locked. Liam pointed at the broken console. This is exactly why we don't ask you for things. You always have to make it about control. A laugh actually escaped me. One of those dry, exhausted laughs you let out when you finally reached your limit. You don't ask me for things? Liam, you've been asking for things since we were teenagers. And I've been giving. And giving. And giving. He winced like the words physically hit him. Mia straightened her posture. You're acting like we owe you something. No, I said. You don't owe me anything. And I don't owe you anything either. Before anyone could respond, Jasper stepped closer and jabbed a finger at me. You're the worst uncle ever. Dad said you'd get me whatever I wanted. My head snapped toward Liam. You told him that. Liam's lips parted, then shut. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. I suddenly understood something. Liam didn't just expect me to help. He promised my help to others as if it was his right. He had woven me into his parenting strategy as the backup plan. The fixer. The guy who would always come through when reality didn't. The realization stung more than I expected. I stepped away, needing space, needing air. But the living room felt too small, like the walls were inching closer. My mom finally spoke, her voice tentative. Caleb, maybe this isn't the place. I turned to her. Mom, with respect, this was never just about today. Her face softened, but she didn't object. Suddenly, Liam's phone buzzed. Loud enough for everyone to hear. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Then his face drained completely of color. What? Mia asked sharply. He didn't answer. He just stared at the notification like it was a ghost. His business partner had texted. We need to talk. Just saw the transfer. What's going on? Mia looked over his shoulder, scanned the message, then snapped her head toward me. What transfer? I didn't respond. She stepped forward. Caleb, what did you do? My silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. But if the tension in the room had been heavy before, it turned suffocating when Liam's phone buzzed again, repeatedly. Notification after notification from employees, from the accountant, from vendors. I watched realization spread over Liam's face like a slow-moving shadow. The business wasn't just something he wanted. It was the only thing keeping them afloat. He whispered, You wouldn't. I would, I said. Before he could respond, Jasper threw his hands up. Can someone please fix my gift already? The entire room stared at him. And for the first time in his life, Jasper seemed to notice the silence wasn't in his favor. But then it happened. The moment that shifted the entire day from bad to catastrophic. Mia exhaled sharply, stepped forward, and actually said, Caleb, you need to apologize to Jasper. Right now. Everyone froze. You showed up with the wrong gift, she continued. You upset him, and now you're humiliating his father. This is your fault. So fix it. My fault. Those two words hit me harder than anything else that afternoon. And something in me, some last thread of patience, finally snapped. I opened my mouth to answer. But before I could say a single word, the front door burst open, and the last person I expected to see stepped inside. His eyes went straight to me. His expression was pale, tight, and urgent. He said my name, and everything in the room shifted. When the front door swung open, the room looked like a paused movie. Everyone frozen in disbelief, mid-breath. And standing in the doorway was someone I hadn't seen in months, my cousin Aaron. Not a dramatic figure by nature. Not someone who storms into rooms or interrupts birthday parties. But the look on his face, it wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was urgency. The kind that hits the body first, thoughts second. Caleb, he said, breathless. We need to talk. Now. Liam turned toward him, annoyed. Hey, man, this is a family moment. Aaron cut him off. This is about family. There was something in his tone that silenced even Mia. He stepped farther into the room, eyes flicking to Liam, then Mia, then Jasper, then finally back to me. A silent question. A silent confirmation. He'd walked into something awful, but he wasn't reacting to the scene. He was reacting to what he'd come to tell me. Let's go outside, he said quietly. I felt the entire room watching as I moved toward him. I didn't look back. Not at Liam. Not at Mia. Not at Jasper still glaring like he was the only one entitled to attention. My chest felt tight, but not in anger anymore, just exhaustion. Exhaustion so deep it felt like it weighed down my bones. The second we stepped outside, Aaron shut the door behind us and exhaled hard. Okay, I said. What's going on? His eyes softened, his shoulders dropping a little. I didn't know how else to tell you. Tell me what? He hesitated. Your mom called me earlier. That alone knotted something in my stomach. Mom wasn't someone who called people unnecessarily. If she reached out, it was because she felt she couldn't call me directly in that moment. She was worried, Aaron continued. About you. About how much you've been carrying on your own. She said she felt helpless. She said she didn't know how to make you step back before something snapped. I blinked. She said that. Yeah. He sighed. She said she thinks you've been hiding how much stress you've been under. My jaw clenched involuntarily. For years, I'd built myself into the guy who didn't break, didn't complain, didn't ask for help. I thought it was strength. Maybe it wasn't. Then Aaron reached into his jacket and pulled out a small stack of papers. Legal documents. My name printed at the top. What is this? Your accountant called my mom, he said slowly. Because they couldn't reach you. They tried calling twice. I stared. Why would they call her? Emergency contact, he said. And because it's important. He handed me the papers. I unfolded the first page. Read the heading. Read the numbers. Then I froze. Because I wasn't looking at debt, or trouble, or a financial disaster. I was looking at something I hadn't expected. A valuation report. For my investments. For my own small portfolio, the one I'd nurtured quietly in the background while helping Liam stay afloat. The numbers were absurd. My portfolio hadn't just grown, it had exploded. Wait, what? I breathed. Aaron nodded, almost smiling. Yeah, the market shift last quarter hit everything you invested in at the perfect time. Your stakes tripled, more in some areas. I kept scanning the pages. My acquisitions, my diversified holdings, all the little projects I'd put money into over the years, not expecting miracles, just long-term growth. But while I was busy babysitting Liam's financial irresponsibility, quietly helping others, quietly keeping everything running, my own life had been building momentum behind the scenes. Caleb, Aaron said softly, you're not just doing okay. You're doing great. My breaths felt shallow. This wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't exaggerated. It was math, numbers, valuation, and signatures from professionals who didn't exaggerate anything. I didn't even know. I whispered. Yeah, Aaron said. I figured you didn't. The air was cool, quiet, a complete contrast to the chaos inside that house. And that's when it hit me. For years, I'd been so focused on fixing everyone else's problems, I had never once stepped back and asked myself what I actually wanted, what my future looked like, what I deserved. And worse, I had let people treat my kindness like a currency they never had to repay. Why did you come here? I asked finally. Because, Aaron replied. Your mom said she didn't want you to find out alone. She was scared you'd look at the numbers and still feel like you're not allowed to enjoy it, like you're not allowed to move on. She wanted someone, anyone, to make sure you knew you didn't have to stay chained to them. Them, Liam, Mia, their endless emergencies, their entitlement, their expectations. I looked down at the papers again. My name at the top. Numbers that represented security, freedom, independence. Something I'd earned without even realizing how far it had grown. And I felt it. A drop of something warm in my chest. Relief. Not joy. Not excitement. Relief. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't trapped in the role I'd played my whole life. I don't know what to do, I admitted. The confession felt strange, like peeling off armor I'd welded to myself years ago. You don't have to do anything right now, Aaron said gently. Just breathe. Take a step back. Think about what's best for you. Not them. I let out a long breath. I should go home. He nodded. Yeah, I'll drive you. I hesitated. My car's here. Then leave it, he said simply. You can come back for it later. You don't need to walk back into that house. I glanced toward the front door. Inside, I could almost feel the tension simmering. Liam pacing, Mia whispering, Jasper complaining, everyone trying to stitch together a narrative that didn't make them look bad. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty walking away. I got into Aaron's car, closed the door, exhaled slowly as the engine hummed to life. The drive was quiet, calm. No questions, no judgment. Just the hum of the road and the sense that something inside me had finally cracked open in a good way. When we reached my place, Aaron pulled to a stop and turned to me. Listen, he said gently, you're not alone. You never were. You just didn't look up. I nodded. Thank you. He squeezed my shoulder once. Rest. Think. But don't let them drag you back in. Not this time. I went inside my house and locked the door. For the first time in years, my home felt like mine. Quiet. Peaceful. A place I didn't have to share with anyone else's needs or messes. I sat down on the couch, the papers still in my hand. My brain finally slowed enough for the weight of the day to settle. The broken PS5, the demands for an apology, the entitlement, the humiliation, the threats, the years of taking advantage, the quiet fear in Liam's eyes, the carefully hidden calculation in Mia's, the sudden shift in my own future. My phone buzzed. Liam. Then again. Mia. Then again. My mom. Then my dad. Then Jasper. Voice messages, whining, demanding, still thinking the entire world revolved around him. I set the phone face down on the table. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, got myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like a person again. Not a bank account. Not a safety net. Not the responsible brother. Not the fixer. A person. I slept that night better than I had in weeks. Months, maybe. The next morning, everything felt clearer. Like seeing the world through clean glass. I made coffee. I sat down with my laptop. I opened the portfolio dashboard. I reviewed my numbers, my options, my future. And I realized something. I didn't need vengeance. I didn't need drama. I didn't need to win. I just needed to grow. And so, quietly, almost secretly, I began rebuilding myself. I started calling people back about opportunities I'd previously turned down because Liam needed me. I met with a couple of small business owners who wanted advice. I reconnected with a mentor I hadn't spoken to in ages. I even got back into running, something I hadn't done in years. And every day, I felt a little stronger, a little more like myself. But the universe has a way of reminding you that peace never lasts forever. And after 3 calm days, something happened. Something that made every quiet, rebuilding moment screech to a halt. Because late that afternoon, while I was reviewing some investment documents, there was a loud knock at my front door. Not a soft tap, not a hesitant greeting, a demanding, forceful, open up right now knock. I froze, put the laptop down, walked toward the door, looked through the peephole. The person standing on the other side of my door wasn't Liam. It wasn't Mia. It wasn't Jasper or my parents or even one of the cousins who'd witnessed the meltdown. That would have been predictable. This was something else entirely, something that made my pulse kick up just a little, not from fear, but from the sense that whatever peace I'd managed to build over the last 3 days had just shattered. It was Mr. Dalton, my brother's business partner, a man who rarely showed emotion, rarely raised his voice, and rarely showed up unannounced to anyone's home unless something was catastrophically wrong. And the look on his face told me this was exactly that. I opened the door slowly. Mr. Dalton? He exhaled sharply, stepping inside before I even finished speaking. Caleb, I'm sorry to bother you like this, but we need to talk. Immediately, I closed the door behind him. What's going on? He rubbed the bridge of his nose, pacing once like a man trying to organize his thoughts. I've been trying to reach Liam. He's not answering me. And I've been trying to reach you as well, but your phone. I silently gestured toward the phone lying face down on my coffee table. I turned it off. He gave a stiff nod. He understood more than he said. Right. Well, look, I got a notification the other day about a sudden ownership transfer. Shocked the entire board. 30% of the company shifting back into your name? No warning? No explanation? I nodded. It was part of the agreement Liam signed when we set up his business. There were terms. He violated them. Mr. Dalton stopped pacing. His eyebrows lifted slightly. He what? Multiple times, I said. And then, let's just say things escalated at his son's birthday party. That felt like the understatement of the century, but I didn't want to walk him through an hour-long emotional breakdown in my living room. The terms allowed me to reclaim my shares immediately. Mr. Dalton watched me for a long moment. Not angry, surprisingly. Not even annoyed. Just thoughtful. Finally, he said, You know, I always suspected you were the one keeping that business stable. I blinked. What do you mean? He let out a slow, almost sad breath. Caleb, your brother is a good salesman, but he's not a manager. He's not consistent. He's not reliable. Half the time he comes into work late and leaves early. The only reason the business didn't collapse years ago is because someone, and by someone, I mean you, kept injecting money into the cracks. I didn't know whether to feel validated or stupid. Maybe both. He continued, voice softer now, but now? With you holding that percentage? With everything going the way it is? We need to talk about what comes next. I sat on the couch, gesturing for him to take a seat across from me. He didn't sit at first. His mind was clearly racing, but eventually he lowered himself onto the chair. I assume Liam hasn't told you anything, I said. He hasn't answered a single call, Mr. Dalton replied. But the accountant told me the mortgage auto payment was canceled. Payroll access froze for 24 hours. And vendors are seeing delays. He paused. Is everything all right? It was a genuine question, and one with an unfortunately complicated answer. I'm fine, I said, but things with my brother aren't. He nodded slowly. I see. Then something in his posture shifted. No longer tense. No longer frazzled. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. I want to offer you something. I didn't expect that. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder, sliding it across the table toward me. I opened it. Inside was a detailed business restructuring proposal, one where I wasn't a silent investor, not a bailout artist, not a safety net, but a partner, and more than that, a majority owner. I stared at the document, trying to wrap my brain around the implications. I know you've stayed in the background, he said quietly, but considering the circumstances, I think it's time the person who actually understands stability steps into the role that matters. My stomach tightened. You're asking me to save the business, he finished. Your brother can stay involved in some capacity if you want. Or not. That's entirely up to you. But the company needs leadership. Real leadership. I set the folder down, rubbing my palms slowly along the edge. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about settling scores or humiliating Liam. This was about acknowledging something I had ignored for too long. The more I pulled myself out of the hole my family kept dragging me into, the more opportunities appeared. The more I stood up for myself, the more the world seemed to open instead of collapse. But something about this offer, this sudden shift into a position of real authority, felt heavier than anything else. This is a lot, I said after a moment. I know, Mr. Dalton replied. Take your time, but don't take too long. Liam has already been making poor decisions out of sheer panic. We need steady hands. Panic. Of course he was panicking. For the past 3 days, I had ignored every message, every missed call, every accusation, and every plea that likely filled my voicemail. And I knew exactly what was happening inside his head. He wasn't reflecting. He wasn't learning. He wasn't apologizing. He was scrambling, trying to figure out how to undo what I did, trying to find a shortcut, trying to pressure me, guilt me, manipulate me back into position. I exhaled slowly. Let me think. Of course, Mr. Dalton said, standing. But Caleb, I'm glad you finally stood up for yourself. That sentence stayed with me long after he left. When the door closed and I sat alone with the proposal in my hands, something inside me twisted. Not uncomfortably, not painfully, but with recognition. This was the beginning, not of vengeance, not of spite, the beginning of choosing myself. Still, I couldn't deny it. This opportunity made something else possible, something I hadn't planned for but had begun to consider. A structured revenge is not just about punishment. It's about clarity. It's about fairness. It's about reclaiming what was taken. It's about ensuring the pattern doesn't repeat. And there was a pattern. Years of it. Liam taking. Liam demanding. Liam assuming I was there to clean up every mess like a one-man emotional janitorial service. But now his access was gone. And he was spiraling. I spent that evening pacing the living room, the folder open on the coffee table, my mind turning in slow, deliberate circles. What did I want? What did I need? What was the right move? Not the angry move. Not the emotional move. Not the retaliatory move. The strategic move. At around midnight, I made tea, sat at the counter, and finally opened the messages on my phone. 129 unread texts. From Liam alone. Everything from, bro, can you just call me? This is ridiculous. 2. You need to fix what you did or the business is going into freefall. 2. Why are you doing this? Just apologize to Jasper so we can move on. And finally, if you don't call me back tonight, I swear I'll show up at your house. I set the phone down. He hadn't changed. He wasn't sorry. He didn't even understand why I stepped away. And that was when the idea formed. Not fully, not clearly, not even consciously. But the shape of a plan began taking form in the back of my mind. A plan that wasn't about making him suffer, but making the truth undeniable. He needed to see the consequences of his actions, not just for one day, not just for one argument, but for years of behavior he had never been held accountable for. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about thinking it. I felt justified. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. I expected anger, worry, confusion. Instead, her voice was quiet and tired. "Caleb, your brother came here last night." I closed my eyes. "What did he do?" She hesitated. "He was upset. Very upset. He said you're trying to ruin him." I swallowed. "And what did you say?" "I told him," she said softly, "that maybe he should start taking responsibility for himself." That surprised me. My mom had never spoken that directly about him before. But something in her tone told me she had reached her own breaking point long before I had. "He wants to talk," she added. "He said he's coming to your house today." I checked the time. 2:13 p.m. I had about an hour. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "Caleb, be careful." Probably the most cryptic thing she'd ever said to me. After we hung up, I walked to the living room, straightened the documents on my coffee table, cleaned the space instinctively, and took a slow breath. This wasn't going to be an apology session. This wasn't going to be about smoothing things over. This wasn't going to be one more round of Caleb fixes everything while Liam gets rewarded for bad behavior. This was going to be the start of the setup, the first real move. And when the knock finally came, loud, hurried, unsteady, I didn't rush. I walked to the door. I placed my hand on the knob. I inhaled once, slowly. Then I opened it. And standing on my porch was Liam, red-faced, disheveled, shaking with anger or fear. I couldn't tell. But it wasn't just him. Standing slightly behind him was Mia, tight-lipped, focused, watching me like I was a puzzle piece she suddenly needed. Liam didn't waste a second. The moment I opened the door, he pushed past me into the living room. Not violently, just with the entitled urgency of a man who had never once considered that someone might say stop. Mia followed him in with long, controlled steps, her eyes scanning my home as if calculating what everything cost. She always did that, measuring the world in terms of ownership, what she could claim, what she could shame, what she could use. I closed the door behind them. Neither said thank you. Neither said, "Can we talk?" No. Liam spun around, face flushed, voice cracking with the strain of someone who finally realized their world wasn't built on solid ground. "You're destroying my life," he said, pointing at me. "Do you understand that? Do you have any idea what the last 3 days have been like for us?" I raised an eyebrow. "For you?" His jaw tightened. "Don't start with me. You know exactly what I mean." Mia crossed her arms. "We are trying to have a calm, mature conversation, Caleb." Calm, mature. From the same woman who watched her son smash a $600 console because it wasn't the version he wanted. I simply stood there and waited. When they realized I wasn't reacting emotionally, Liam's voice rose. "You have to fix this. Right now. Transfer the shares back. Put the mortgage payments back. Call the vendors and tell them it was a mistake." No. The word hung in the air like a chime made of glass. Sharp, clean, undeniable. Liam stared at me, eyes widening with disbelief. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I repeated. "I'm not fixing anything. You don't get to decide that," he snapped. "I already did." He blinked rapidly, as if someone hit him with a flashlight. "This isn't a game, Caleb. I'm serious. You're ruining everything I've built." "You didn't build it," I said calmly. "I did. And you used it." He opened his mouth, ready to throw something back, but nothing came out. He just stood there, chest heaving. Mia stepped forward. "Caleb, let's talk woman to." She stopped, adjusted. "Adult to adult. You've made your point. You're upset. We understand. But this is excessive." "No," I said again. "This is overdue." She glared. "You were always dramatic." I laughed softly. "If anyone in your house is dramatic, it's your son." "Don't bring Jasper into this," she snapped. "He's 13. He had a moment of frustration. Most 13-year-olds don't destroy expensive gifts and then demand apologies." She squared her shoulders. "That's your opinion." "No," I said. "That's reality." Liam threw his hands in the air. "Enough. I don't care about the birthday anymore, okay? Forget the birthday. This is about my business. It's falling apart." I nodded. "Yes, it is. You have to fix it," he said again. Softer this time. Pleading. I stepped toward him. "Liam, You spent years treating me like a backup generator you could switch on whenever your life started flickering. A resource, a convenience, someone who would always pick up the slack without asking questions. I paused. And you were right, until now. His voice broke. Caleb, please. The employees. I don't have the money to cover payroll this month. That hit me harder than I expected. Not for him, but for the people who worked there. People who didn't deserve to be pulled into his chaos. I took a slow breath. I'm aware. You can't let this happen, he said desperately. You can't let the business collapse. I'm not letting it collapse. He blinked. What? And that's when I picked up the folder Mr. Dalton had given me. I placed it on the table between us and flipped it open. I'm taking over. The silence was so sudden and heavy it felt like pressure on my chest. Liam stared at the documents, then at me, then back at the documents. His face slowly flushed red again, this time deeper. Hotter. More wounded than angry. No, he whispered. You can't do this. I already can, I said. The shares are legally mine. The board knows. The accountant knows. The vendors know. Mr. Dalton knows. The only person who hasn't accepted it yet is you. This is my business, he said, voice cracking. No, I said softly. It was your business. And you treated it like another one of your chores you could put off. I'm stepping in to protect the people who depend on it. The people you've been neglecting. He sank onto the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands gripping his hair. Mia's voice turned ice cold. You're punishing us. I turned toward her. No, not punishing. Consequences. That's the same thing. No, I repeated. Punishment is emotional. Consequences are logical. She stepped closer, voice lowering. You've always hated me. I shook my head. I don't hate you, Mia. I think you enabled the worst in my brother, and I think you both taught your child that the world is a vending machine. But hate? No. I just won't sacrifice my life for you anymore. She stared at me with something between shock and disdain. I looked back at Liam. You can stay in the business, I said, but not in your current role. His head snapped up. What does that mean? It means you go back to being what you're good at. Sales. Lead generation. Client relationships. You're charismatic. You can charm almost anyone. But you cannot run a company. And you can, he shot back. Yes, I said simply. He stood suddenly, fists clenched. This isn't fair. Neither was expecting me to fund your life indefinitely. Mia stepped forward. If you do this, Caleb, our family will never forgive you. I met her eyes. You mean your family? She blinked, taken aback. My voice softened, not with weakness, but with finality. We stopped being a family the moment you both decided my worth was based on what I could give, not who I was. Liam's breathing went shaky. Caleb, I'm going to lose everything. I stepped closer. No, you're going to lose the version of everything that relied on me never saying no. He stared at me, his expression shifting through every stage of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, despair. Eventually, he settled on something like acceptance, though it wasn't acceptance of the situation. It was acceptance that I had changed, and I wasn't going back. The rest was surprisingly simple. Within a week, the board approved my new position. Mr. Dalton stepped into a co-leadership role. Payroll was fixed. Vendors were stabilized. The employees were informed of the transition. And Liam? He came back to work. Quietly. No tantrums. No grand speeches. No attempts to reclaim authority. His desk was moved out of the corner office and into the main space. A smaller desk. A more practical one. He didn't complain. Not once. Because for the first time in his life, he had no leverage. Mia didn't come near the office again. And Jasper? I didn't see him for months. But I heard stories, from mutual relatives, from my parents, from people who still interacted with that household. The smashed PS5 became a turning point. Not because of me, but because the fallout in their home forced Liam and Mia to confront something they never had before. Their son had no concept of consequences. Jasper hated the new rules. The lack of instant gratification. The sudden expectation that he care about other people's feelings. But it wasn't my battle. It never had been. My relationship with my parents improved dramatically. They stopped tiptoeing around Liam's feelings. They started holding him accountable, even gently. And as for me, my life finally felt like my own. I woke up every morning knowing I wasn't living in service to someone else's emergencies. I started taking classes again, something I'd put off for years. I traveled more. I breathed more. The weight I'd been carrying for a decade slowly lifted, piece by piece. One evening, about 3 months after everything, I got a text from Liam. Just one line. "I think I finally understand why you stopped helping me." I read it twice. Then I put my phone down. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because I had already given enough of my life to him. There was nothing left to explain, and nothing left to repair. Peace doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with distance. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. Sometimes it comes with choosing yourself without saying a word. And so the revenge, the fallout, the rise, it all led to one simple truth. I finally stopped carrying a brother who never learned to walk. And for the first time in my life, I walked forward alone.